Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever stopped to wonder how a highly localized shift in 18th century British manufacturing managed to trigger a chain reaction that completely rewired global human history? It's honestly one of the most fascinating historical butterfly effects of all time, and today we're going to break down exactly how it happened. To kick things off, we really have to ask what sounds like a bizarre question. How in the world did weaving cloth a little bit faster snowball into the conquest of entire continents? Seriously, how do we get from a simple wooden loom to massive globe-spanning empires? It is a wild escalation, and to make sense of it, we've got to jump right back to the very beginning. Section 1. The Machine Age begins. Let's look at the grand before and after of human production. Think about it. For centuries, human life was strictly agrarian. We made things by hand in small local villages, and it was a really, really slow process. Then, basically overnight on a historical scale, boom, we shift completely to factory mechanization. And it started in England because of a literal perfect storm. It wasn't just one magic ingredient, right? You had this incredible abundance of natural resources, tons of coal and iron, plus Britain had total naval supremacy to protect its trade routes, add in all the surplus capital they'd saved up from earlier trade, and an agricultural boom that suddenly freed up a massive workforce. It was just the absolute ultimate incubator for industrialization. So the first domino to fall here is mechanization. We're talking about swapping out human handwork for machines. This sparked like wildfire in the textile industry, thanks to incredible inventions like the spinning jenny and the power loom. But the real game changer? The steam engine. Powered by coal, steam gave us an unstoppable, massive energy source that literally changed how we produce things forever. Moving to Section 2, cities, slums, and workers, because we have to look at the immediate, brutal, local fallout of this new system. See, when agriculture mechanized, farmers lost their jobs, which led to this massive wave of people migrating to the cities looking for work. And this new urban reality created a stark, extreme contrast. On one side, you've got the new capitalist and middle classes, the managers, the owners. They're gaining immense wealth, skilled jobs, and serious political influence as the old feudal system faded away. But on the flip side, all that comfort was built directly on the backs of the working class. We're talking absolute squalor. 16-hour shifts, zero job security, child labor, and overcrowded slum living where diseases like cholera and typhoid were just running rampant. Naturally, you push people that hard, there's going to be friction. The working class started to push back. They formed trade unions so they could negotiate together, demanding minimum wages, safety rules, and just basic human workplace rights. And at the exact same time, this intense extreme of inequality birthed entirely new ideologies. Thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels fiercely criticized capitalism, arguing instead that we needed a completely classless society where the means of production were owned collectively. Which brings us to Section 3, the demand for empires. Because the machines, they just kept turning out goods. Despite all that social unrest at home, the factories were relentless. But suddenly, you run into a huge problem. If your factory is producing thousands and thousands of textiles, who's actually going to buy them? And where do you get enough raw materials to keep the machines running? In a way, these factories were almost too successful. This created a checklist of 4 massive industrial needs that violently transitioned our story from domestic manufacturing directly into global empire building. They needed an endless supply of raw materials, like cotton and rubber. They desperately needed new, captive markets to buy all their surplus goods. Wealthy industrialists needed fresh outlets to invest their capital. And, of course, they needed a constant source of cheap labor. This constant, insatiable hunger for resources and markets birthed what we call new imperialism. This period, which basically spanned from the mid-1800s right up to World War I, saw powerful, industrialized nations racing to secure and control overseas territories. Whether by direct conquest or strong-arming political influence, they did whatever it took to keep their economic machines fed. Section 4. Tools of Conquest. Having the motive is one thing, but how did they actually pull this off logistically? Seriously? How did European powers conquer the globe so fast, completely overwhelming regions they can never penetrate before? Well, it came down to 4 major technological advancements that acted as literal unlocks for the colonizers. First, you had steamships and the Suez Canal, which made rapid global travel and deep river navigation possible. Then, the telegraph, which essentially gave them instant long-distance administrative control. Third is quinine, a vital medical breakthrough to treat malaria, which finally allowed Europeans to survive deep in tropical zones. And finally, the Maxim gun. This early machine gun gave them overwhelming, devastating firepower against any native resistance. Section 5, the global impact. We need to look at both the justifications used back then and the enduring legacy left behind. With the globe now effectively carved up, we have to step back and neutrally examine how this was all justified. And it was a really complex, often contradictory web of motives. Alongside the raw economic and military strategy we talked about, you also had these humanitarian claims used as a mask. Empires touted a so-called civilizing mission, or leaned into the deeply prejudiced concept of the white man's burden, which was this idea that Western powers had a moral duty to impose their culture and values onto other societies. But the reality on the ground, it was absolutely devastating. Native populations suffered a total loss of their political independence. Their local, self-sufficient economies were completely crushed by a flood of cheap, machine-made foreign goods. You saw severe resource exploitation, widespread racial segregation that treated Native people as second-class citizens in their own homes, and brutal taxation that, in some cases, led directly to horrific famines. Yet, history is full of wild paradoxes, right? Because alongside all that exploitation, imperial rule also spread modern infrastructure, things like railways and global communication networks. They also introduced Western concepts of science, modern law, and democracy. And paradoxically, those very same railways, those exact same introduced ideals of equality, eventually became the very tools that Native populations utilized to organize and launch incredibly powerful freedom movements to win back their independence. So it really is this incredibly complex web of cause and effect, a timeline stretching from a single spinning jenny in England all the way to the complete reshaping of the entire globe. Which leaves us with one crucial, defining point to think about today. Did the relentless chain reaction of the Industrial Revolution ultimately liberate humanity with incredible technological progress? Or did it merely redesign the nature of our chains? I want you to take a moment and really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.